visiting me today. Our story is about a little girl who sees things differently when her perspective changes. Do you know what perspective is? It's when you see a familiar thing in a new way. Are you ready to read? Let's go! Would you girls like to hear a story?
Yes, Miss Karen, we'd love to.
Great! Today's story is entitled Plain Jane, written by Susan Samija, illustrated by students from the Milwaukee French Immersion School. Plain Jane sat alone at recess. She watched all the other kids playing and having fun. Suddenly, one of the kids kicked a ball right past Plain Jane. She wanted to go get the ball and join in their game, but she was afraid to ask if she could play. Instead, she just let the ball roll by. You see, Plain Jane had been at her new school for 4 months and had not made any new friends. At lunch, Plain Jane sat alone at a table in the back of the lunchroom. She liked this table because it was far away from the other kids, and there was enough room to pull out her art book and draw. Plain Jane loved to draw. She drew a yellow house with pink and purple and a garden with all different colored flowers, butterflies, and birds. She looked dreamily at her picture. I wish I lived here instead of our boring old gray house, she thought to herself. Plain Jane walked home alone after school. She stared at the gray sidewalk as she daydreamed that she was walking with a friend while they laughed about all the fun they had at school today. When she arrived at home, her mom was in the garden. Plain Jane wondered why her mom spent so much time in the garden, and yet it looked so wilted and lifeless. The next morning, as Plain Jane brushed her teeth in the bathroom, her annoying brother came running in. Hey, brainless, move it! Nice frilly dress, Plain Jane. He laughed. He always makes fun of how plain I am, she thought. When Plain Jane looked at herself in the mirror, she thought she looked plain and boring. But really, she was wearing her prettiest dress. Plain Jane left her house and started walking to school. When she got to the intersection, she saw a little old lady in a bright, flowery pink and orange dress trying to cross the busy street. Though Plain Jane was scared because she did not know the lady, she asked if she could help her cross the street. That would be lovely, dear, said the lady. As they crossed the street, Plain Jane said, Your dress is pretty. I wish I had a pretty dress with flowers on it, too. The woman looked at her strangely. Your dress is very pretty, the lady replied. When they reached the sidewalk, the little old lady handed Plain Jane some gold coins. She said, These are lucky coins. They will help all your wishes come true, but they only work for children who face their fears. Plain Jane wasn't sure what that meant, so she stammered, Thank you, and started walking toward her school. As she walked, she noticed someone up ahead walking very slowly with her arms full. It was Madeline from her school. Plain Jane had never spoken to Madeline because she was from another country, and Plain Jane was afraid that if she tried to speak to her, she would not know what to say and would just get embarrassed. Today, Plain Jane decided to be brave. She ran up to Madeline. Hi, Madeline. That book looks heavy. Can I help you carry something? Madeline was so startled to hear Jane speak that she almost dropped everything she was carrying. That would be great, she said happily. What is all this? Jane asked. These are items from my country, Madeline told her. I am bringing them to school today for show and tell. She handed Jane several items and told her about each one. This doll is called Petite Caline Poupon, and it is very popular in my country. They both laughed and laughed at the funny-sounding name. Jane was amazed at everything she learned about Madeline's country. Madeline was really interesting. They talked and laughed all the way to school. At school, Jane and Madeline sat together at lunch and played with each other at recess. Jane had so much fun at school that she actually looked forward to going back the next day. After school, Jane and Madeline walked home together. Jane was in such a good mood that everything seemed brighter around her. She heard birds chirping in the trees. She saw red cardinals, blue jays, and orange orioles. She heard music from the shops and people laughing. Everyone seemed to be happy. When they arrived at Jane's house, Madeline promised to meet Jane in the morning. Jane smiled as she watched her friend walk away. She put her hands in her pockets and felt the coins from the old lady. She had forgotten about them. Maybe these are lucky coins, she said to herself. She twisted them between her fingers. As she looked up at her house, she thought, it looks less gray than usual. The next morning, when Jane got dressed, she noticed that her gray dress did not seem gray at all. It looked kind of pink. She even noticed orange flowers in the material. I don't remember those, she thought. After breakfast, Jane was going to color more butterflies and birds in the picture she drew the day before. But when she pulled out her art pad, the paper was blank. That's strange, she thought. Jane packed up her book bag and rushed out the door to meet Madeline. She closed the door slowly and stepped back to look at her house. She could not believe what she saw. Her house was a beautiful yellow with pink and purple trim. It was surrounded by plush green grass. On the side of her house was a beautiful garden filled with colorful flowers, butterflies, and birds. She stood back staring at her beautiful house and yard. She did not hear Madeline come up next to her. Madeline said, I have always loved your house. After being brave enough to talk to Madeline and making her new first friend, Jane realized that she had made her own world gray. She now knew that she did not have to be afraid to talk to other kids. And best of all, she looked forward to school every single day. The end! Thank you for logging on. Make sure you join us next week for another story. And you can purchase your copy of The Colorful Patchwork at Amazon.com, Google Books, or Books A Million. Thanks! Bye-bye!
Bye!